What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. And AJ, I promise I'm not going to hop on this podcast and say I'm surprised about Drake Powell declaring for the NBA draft. I promised myself I wouldn't do it because we talked recently, a couple podcasts ago, and I said I've got to stop hopping on these and saying I'm surprised about anybody entering the transfer portal in any sport. But I am actually surprised about Drake Powell doing it. So I just broke my rule in the first 20 seconds to illustrate a point about.
What I've been telling you for 4 days now. What have I been texting you?
Oh, I know.
I've been texting you, Brian, and Kevin, and then sometimes just you. I've been texting you about where this was quickly headed, right?
I'm not surprised based on the information we knew. I'm just surprised about the decision for a number of different reasons, which we'll kind of get into. And again, if you're watching this podcast, I'm assuming you know what we're here to talk about. I kind of just did a half a intro right there to kind of dive into it. I'll pop
I think there's a punch drunk element to where we are in the process with both portals and the mega roster reconstruction that is called the month of April now in college athletics. I just think that's what it is. I mean, I get it. On the surface, I knew you're going to go into it in a second anyway, but on the surface, why? The other surprising, he seemed like guy was going to go. A week ago, the staff thought everything was set, and now here it goes. So I get the surprise element in that respect, but one of these days, you and I are going to have a conversation, and without having a recorder on, you're going to say, hey, man, it doesn't surprise me at all because anything can happen.
Yeah.
Anything.
And I'm about that.
Like Armando Bacot could regain his eligibility and could be an option quarterback for Bill Belichick next year. That's not exactly entirely out of the realm, is it?
No, dude. And we're not even talking football. I mean, I put a tweet out yesterday, on Tuesday, kind of like after they announced the game against TCU in Ireland. And I'm like, between Bill Belichick being the head coach, between this season starting on a Monday night football in Chapel Hill, and then a game in Ireland against TCU, I'm like, whatever alternate dimension the football program has slipped into since last November, I'm not really sure, but it's like the transfer portal in itself is just this whole thing where you're like surprised when you look at the individual, AJ, and you maybe look at the product and maybe where they're at in their development with a guy like Drake Powell. I've always said that I thought he was a guy that would benefit from another year, albeit at Carolina or somewhere else. Another year in college, I think, would have been beneficial for Drake Powell. Yeah. Now, again, when we have those conversations behind the scenes that we have that don't go on these podcasts, and we know more, and I understand more about what's going on behind the scenes in these decisions, the surprise factor slipped away. It's more of a surprise when you look at the individual because nothing surprises me in the portal anymore. Yeah. Absolutely nothing. So you almost have to like separate those two, but it's kind of getting to a point where it's impossible to separate those two, if that makes sense.
To illustrate this, if I go back to today, we had a football press conference today. Some people from Ireland. The mayor of Dublin was there, Miss Emma Blair, Lord Emma Blair.
That's another thing. I never thought the mayor of Dublin would be in the Keenan football.
She's in there, and she's up there at the podium talking where Mac used to, where Mac would give us in-depth stuff on the third string left guard. And there's the mayor of Dublin. And I asked Bill Belichick, I asked him about, how the players respond when you told him. I said, was it kind of weird that you're telling them that they're going to play in a game in 17 months, and yet half the guys in that room probably won't even be there in 17 months. And a lot of laughter in the room, and Belichick kind of went back to the answer, and that's, well, you're kind of right. There's a lot of movement. But that goes back to what we're saying about Drake Powell, is that there's just so much, wow, didn't see that coming, or wow, that's an interesting decision, because we don't get the guys going to the NBA when they're quote-unquote not ready like we used to. Mm-hmm. Guys used to be in a rush to get to the league because there was a status by leaving after your first year, your second year. Now there's a status in the mid-major level and below of transferring out and going to a big school. And now if you're at Florida, you win a national championship, you say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go to Kentucky. That just happened. So pretty much anything goes, right? Isn't that fair to say?
Yeah,
Drake Powell to the NBA didn't really look like an NBA player this year. Looked like it will take time before he does look like an NBA player. Not to say he wouldn't. Stats aren't there. Just a lot of stuff that's just kind of weird. Doesn't make sense. They would build stuff around him for next year. It's not like a playing time's an issue. But we are at that point with college athletics right now where Drake Powell, who had every reason in the world to return isn't. And how it played out the last few days, to me, is what was surprising. And maybe that's part of what you're talking about, too, because you know some stuff about how it played out, because I've been keeping you guys up to date with it. And it was more surprising than how the Van Allen Lubin stuff has played out. And that's pretty wacky.
Yeah, that one's a weird situation, too. It just is. I mean, there's no other way you can kind of look at it. And we're obviously, and if you're on our Tar Heel Illustrated premium message boards, you can sign up right there at 3 a month, links in the description. You would be privy to some of this information we're referring to, but I don't want to sit on this podcast and be too coy about things, because ultimately I'm gonna look at the YouTube comments and say, why are you guys just, tiptoeing around stuff? So
I was that way with the Lubin one, because I had a hard time telling people enough of what was going on with the concern that I was going to constantly cross the line.
Yeah.
And then and by the way, to clarify my comment about $1 million, I was thinking in terms of like life money, like you could live off that for like generational wealth type of deal. Some guy like Juan Soto, the Mets, he signed a deal that's generational wealth. I was thinking more in those terms.
Well, yeah, I told you off camera. I said welcome to YouTube, because there is a realm of it where people are going to latch on to anything they disagree with, and they're going to just keep hitting you with it until you learn that you shouldn't have said that. Again, I knew what you were trying to say there, 100%. Yeah, but context can kind of slowly and quickly go out of the window on this here website. Sometimes. And
right now they're going to say we're taking too long talking about Drake, but we actually already have talked about Drake some. But let's dive into that.
Yeah, let's dive into it, because I want to talk about some of the things and expand on some of the kind of hint, wink, winks we're talking about in here with some of the information that was going on behind the scenes. So when I look at it on the surface, and I think every other Carolina fan can kind of understand where we're coming from here. Let's focus on the timeline. Season ended a while ago. A lot of guys have already made the moves in the portal, and then you kind of have Drake Powell on Wednesday looming, deadline really coming down, and you're like, okay, what's the situation here? The portal is already closed. What's the situation? Because you're getting close to the deadline of, declaring for the NBA as well. So all of a sudden the news comes out. I look at that on the surface and I say, okay, I wonder if the timeline had anything to do, because I can understand if I put myself in Hubert Davis' shoes, or the basketball program's shoes, and you have a guy in Drake Powell who's maybe not quite made a decision yet, and you're this far into the offseason, you have to kind of get to a point where you say, okay, man, we either need to know what you're going to do, because we've got a roster to build. And if you're going to stay, that's great. And if you're going to go, that's fine. But we need to know. And if we don't know by a certain time, well, we've got to start going out and recruiting over you. I'm not saying that's the situation here, but what can you tell it? Like, did the timeline play any factor in this? Because again, this is pretty late on in the process in a way for it to kind of be coming out. Now, if you knew you're going to test the waters 2 weeks ago, what are you waiting on? Did it really take you that long to figure it out? I think there's just so many questions that I think a lot of Carolina fans have. And the timeline to me seems like it had to have played some kind of factor here from both sides.
The expectation the whole time has been that he would test the waters. That has been the way we talk about it. When we have conversations as a staff, clearly test the waters, go check some stuff out. The value of feedback from outside entities, different NBA teams, GMs, scouts, whatever, coaches, players, whatever. The experience of going to work out for different teams on their turf and going through the interview process, I think any player that has the slightest potential of playing in the NBA should do that.
I don't know why you wouldn't.
Because it's so invaluable. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you get out of it is that if you come back to school, they're giving you all this information you need to improve your game. They're not giving it to you so you could go make North Carolina better. They're getting it to you so you can make yourself better and more attractive to the NBA. And if you apply those things and become that guy, well, it's going to make North Carolina better. So I'm a big fan of guys going through that process. Tyler Lawson got a ton out of it in 2008. That was around the first time. It was around the time when they started allowing guys to go through the process. And he learned some little tidbits about his game that may have been a little tad on the immature side that he fixed. And the next year he passed by Tyler Hansbrough. He was the player of the year that year in the ACC, not Hansbrough, and became his team somewhat. So there's so much to gain from it. The expectation was Drake was going to go through the process for a while, but come back. And you have until June 16th to withdraw. But the belief was he wasn't going to take anywhere near that long. He just needed the experience of going through it some, help him out, come back, and then get rolling when the new guys arrive in mid-May on campus and start working out. Well, Carolina always does his due diligence about getting information for players. But the players go out and get themselves, and they have agents that do it now. And the understanding and the belief was, Drake, you may not get drafted. There's one or two mocks that have him out there in the second round. I haven't seen any new mocks in the last 72 hours because I haven't had the time to look, to be pretty good. Easter was great, but I worked 14 hours on Easter.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Not to mention some interesting nighttime conversations with people that are related to things that we're discussing.
I can only imagine.
It was very interesting. Like, it's Easter. Chill out. So anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
I knew exactly. AJ, oh boy, do I know what you're talking about.
So anyway, this came fast. If his agent hears from a team that says or tells Drake and his family, well, there's a team that might take you late in the first round if you're still there, and of course he's still going to be there. The other teams in the league said, we're not drafting him, basically. Then someone wants to hold on to that. There also could be some other things at play here. Getting a jump start in the pro career, obviously. Maybe thinking that, okay, I'm going to play in the G League next year, but I'll develop differently and better than I would have in North Carolina. He spent a lot of time at the 4. He was out of position. Was not happy about that. The young players on this team were not thrilled about some of the ways Carolina was going about things offensively. And none of those 3 guys are there anymore.
And again, I don't think that should come as a surprise in some ways when you look at how dysfunctional Carolina was offensively for big chunks of last season.
No, I mean, Drake Powell had if the season was a cake, he had a couple of slices of playing where he should be playing. Mm-hmm. That's it. So he goes to the G League. They're not going to stick him at the 4. The team will own him, and they're going to essentially, and they'll put him where they want to play it, put him to get his game. So a lot of this is a basketball developmental thing. It's not so much money because he would make a lot of money at Carolina. And if you're North Carolina in these conversations that suddenly come up over the last several days, because remember a week ago they thought everything was set.
Oh no!
I didn't text with David Sisk for a few days. I told my wife, "All right, basketball's set. Now it's just football portal. I can see a light at the end of the tunnel." Well, there was an avalanche. There's rocks filling the tunnel.
Yeah, that tunnel is.
Can't see anything. Yeah, so that was because they thought that, well, okay, they're going to go check things out and come back. For Carolina, if you're in Hubert and Jim Tanner's shoes, and over the short period of time, you've got the Lubin and Powell stuff happening, where you go from being set to not being set, and you handle them both differently because they're different cases, but they both situations annoy the hell out of you and frustrate you and put your back against the wall because you've got to field a team. You got to go out and get a roster. So you can't sit there and wait for Drake Powell to go into June without knowing yet. And perhaps Drake's camp said, well, maybe we're going to take longer because we really want to try to get into the first round. And the workouts are going to get us in the first round. If you're Hubert Davis, you have an obligation to the team, the university, and the fan base that pays the bills to put a team out there. And that's a hole that you must fill. You can't go into next season without replacing what Drake Powell can give the team. You can go into next season without replacing Vanal and Lubin because you've got Stevenson, you've got Vasar, you've got Zayden High, you got James Brown, you got Caleb Wilson. But there is no other Drake Powell-like guy. It's not Jonathan Powell. He's not anywhere near the same kind of player Drake is. I think he's a nice piece, but he's not that guy. So Carolina perhaps says to Drake, look, we need to know. Like you were saying a minute ago, we have our responsibilities too. This isn't just about Drake Powell. So I think fans need to understand that both the player and the program have to take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. Guys got to go chase the bag. People always say, but they never say, hey, program's got to take care of itself. Program's bigger than the guy who wants to go chase the bag. So I think what we're talking about here is Drake fulfilling a dream. He got an opportunity to continue that. He'll go play somewhere in the G League, maybe even get on an NBA roster. We don't know. and have an opportunity to develop into a role in how the league sees him and not get stuck in a situation where he's playing out of position at North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just to go back to it, it's not necessarily a surprise that Drake Powell's not returning to North Carolina next year. I mean, we talk about it all the time with the portal and how fast it moves and how anything just kind of goes in there now. And it's not necessarily a surprise that he wanted to test the waters. The surprise for me, and I think for us as a collective, is just when you look at the sample size of freshman season, a lot to like about Drake's game, a lot to like about where it can go. But from that to, hey, I'm going to go to the NBA, it's kind of like that is the decision that kind of surprises you there. But for me, it's also the timeline that we talked about. That surprises me too, because I kind of sit here like I always wonder what takes so long to make a decision like that. I know there's a lot that goes into it, and I know there's a lot of evaluation and, you know, talking to teams and talking to agents and players that goes into making that decision. But the fact that it takes as long as it does for him to figure it out, and then all of a sudden it just kind of happens, and the decision that's made doesn't really seem like the one that a lot of people, if you were betting on it, would have gone with, or based on watching him his freshman year, would have thought was best for him moving forward. But again, I think all this illustrates just where we're at with college athletics right now. And I'm not saying Drake Powell might not go, like you just mentioned, and go make an NBA roster and go, if at the very minimum, be a decent player on a G League team. And maybe overall that is better for his development. I don't know. Only time will tell, AJ. Hindsight's 2020, and we'll know eventually. But it just, I said to you off camera, it almost feels like if the transfer portal doesn't exist, if this is 15, 20 years ago, it just feels like Drake Powell's back, and he's a very important piece for North Carolina next year, and that's the best thing for him because his game improves and he's even more of an integral player for North Carolina next season. But that is, I think, what we're trying to illustrate here is that's just the world, not the world we live in now. So when these things happen like that, it's hard to be surprised, but it's also hard not to be surprised at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Dean Smith had a role there for a while where if you're a top 5 pick, you should go.
Mm-hmm. And that
top 5 pick, you should.
That makes
go.
a ton of sense.
Not top 6, top 5.
Yeah.
So 33 days ago, from right now, and what time is it? From right now, 33 days ago, mm-hmm. I'm in the locker room talking to Drake Powell after the loss to Ole Miss. That was 33 days ago, 5 weeks.
Over a month, yeah.
And I asked him, I was talking to him about his future, and I said, what do you think? What areas of the game do you think improved this year that would help you maybe make that jump? The first thing he brought up was strength. And his game never spoke strength to me, not physical strength, because he wasn't there yet. He's got a lot of developing to do in his body, but there was some mental strength. As I kind of went back over his season and combed over literally, I don't want to say every shot, that would be overdoing it, but every segment he played during the season, I've already combed over that, putting together off-season work, content, thinking he might come back. Got to get that done. And one of the things that impressed me about his mental growth late in the year was that he took some big shots late. Didn't usually make them, but he went from not taking big shots and sometimes not even being in the game to taking some big ones against Duke. He missed 2 shots in the last 48 seconds, whatever it was, against Ole Miss. And I think of a guy like him and say he's a classic example of coming back, where you go in the offseason, you work, you get stronger. A guy like him, add 7 pounds, make a world of difference. Get stronger, be better off the dribble, creating, because he was a guy the ball never stuck with. He'd get rid of it quickly, quick. That's one of the reasons why he played out there, because he never really brought them down. He didn't always elevate, but they didn't get worse when he was on the floor, generally speaking, because he didn't make a lot of mistakes. But then you start adding more offense and the ability to hit that big shot, because right now you look at the roster, who's hitting the big shot, right? I would have thought a guy like him would give me the opportunity to go from that observation right now to next March, writing a story about how Drake Powell worked his butt off to make that key shot with 46 seconds left against Ole Miss. And that's what coming back's all about. And then suddenly you're a dude that might be ready for the league. It's not going to happen that way. He'll still work on it. I'm sure it still means it's the same thing to him. He'll just have to apply it somewhere else. But that's what we would like to see it be. I would love to watch him come back and develop another year. We're not going to see it. He's going to have to do it in another realm. There's some chirping about, well, maybe the door's still open. I don't know. If you're North Carolina, you have to go ahead. You have to fill. You have to go fill.
Yeah.
And Carolina has to know because they got to tell who they're going to talk to in the portal that you got to fill. So they got to know. They had to qualify Drake. Yes or no? We've got to fill the spot. And if the answer is, well, I might come back, and you and I were going to do a podcast on this actually. Well, I might come back. Then the guy that you would bring in to fill that spot for, let's say, $1.2 million, you got to pay him 1.8 now because there's no guarantee. Why would someone go to Carolina not 100% sure if Drake Powell's going to be back or not? Whereas if he doesn't come back, you start or play a ton. He does come back, you're 18 minutes a game.
Yeah.
So you have to pay him a lot to come. It's like with Carolina looking for a backup quarterback in the portal right now. They got to pay him a lot because they already got one. They already got their quote-unquote starter. So you have to pay someone a lot to go into that situation and somewhat sit. So they needed answers from him. I think we know what the answer is. They're going to look to fill quickly. It's one of the reasons they were watching the Stojakovic visit to Illinois on Tuesday. That spot is to fill the need that Drake leaving has created.
This is an interesting situation, man. It really is. This whole portal thing is just it's fascinating in one way, and so it's something that makes your brain hurt sometimes too, because of how how many crazy things happen. And again, let me just reiterate, I'm not saying Drake Powell declaring for the NBA draft is necessarily a crazy thing, but like you just said, I think it's something that for a lot of different reasons, my opinion will always be, at least right now and moving forward until we see what Drake does in the league. But then again, it's just, Monday morning quarterback. And my opinion is it just feels like him coming back for another year would have been a lot more beneficial for his development. But like I've said, you can go develop in the G League in an organization. So
isn't that sort of the portal too?
That's what I'm saying.
The difference is the teams that he'll consider, he would be the teams he would have a chance to go to and be under ownership of, so to speak, are pro teams. So let's say he's in the pro portal now, and the Oklahoma City Thunder will take on a sign of their G League team, or however that stuff works, as opposed to going in the portal and I'm going to go to Rutgers. Well, there's no guarantee at Rutgers. At least if a team's investing money in you from a professional standpoint, they already have the operating mindset. We're going to work you and work you and work you. Mm-hmm. You could go to another college. Let's say, for the sake of discussion, Jalen Washington's at Vanderbilt. Let's say what's his name? Mark Byington, the coach at Vanderbilt, after 5 games, I'm not really a big fan of what he can do. He's only got 1 year left. I'm not going to work with him anymore. We just banish him. That's not going to happen in the G League. Not that anybody would banish Drake, but I'm just trying to draw
no, it makes sense.
Analogy here. So he's in the portal. It's just a pro portal.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to look at it.
And he can go somewhere and, he may actually make less money there than he would at North Carolina, but he's also fast-tracking himself to the next contract. If he's good enough to be an NBA guy, he'll get an NBA contract, and he's kind of moved the clock up on that.
Yeah, and then when you look at it from that perspective, again, you can kind of understand why that maybe was an appealing, thing for him to potentially explore, which he's ultimately decided to do. So, yeah, last thing I'll say, you mentioned, I have to say this because you mentioned the 08-09 team earlier, obviously won the national title, Tyler Hansbrough and co. And I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking after that, I'm like, man, we're probably never going to see a team like that again in college basketball or in Carolina. When you think about who was on that team, you think about how long a lot of those guys had been there. You think about, and you look at just this year, this small month, 33-day sample size for North Carolina, and the sheer amount of roster turnover that you've seen. I don't know if you'll ever see teams like that anymore. It doesn't feel like we're in that era of college basketball anymore. And
the value of college basketball will go down. The emotional heartstrings that people have attached to it will go down. People... You can embrace a Brady Manic because after Carolina, he goes professionally. He doesn't go choose another school. It's weird how the fans love Cormac, they love Brady, they love Harrison Ingram because they chose Carolina. They originally were somewhere else, chose Carolina, then they went to the pros. whatever level it is. But when you come in and then you leave, oh, you left us. Like we're in the same clique, and you're going to go out with somebody else in that clique now.
Yeah.
And you don't really like them as much anymore. We're getting to a point where the fans don't like the players as much as they used to.
There's not as much of that connection because it's like people just leave. It happens all the time. You know what I mean? You're not even able to form that connection in a way because it's like, yeah, this guy might be here for a year and he'll probably leave. And anybody like a Drake Powell, for instance, I mean, I think he's a guy that, like I said, I mean, 20 years ago, I think he's a 2-3 year guy, like minimum. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. A guy like him was like a 4-year guy. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But it's just not the world we live in anymore. It's just, Drake Powell being a 1-year guy. It's like, it's just different times, man. And I think he's a talented player. I do. I'm not hating on his ability at all. It's just, I think it just illustrates the different time period that we now live in this whole college athletic, whatever the heck you want to call it thing.
I think that when you think of the guys that left, a lot of them have a concern and may have had a beef with how they were used and with the offensive operation, so to speak. And that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. I know some of them were because they commiserated. Mm-hmm. I think we're more there now because young people, when I say young people, college age kids, and a lot of young people are kind of thought to think solely about themselves. What's your brand? We're in the TikTok nature, though. That's the selfie nature. Look at me. Look what I'm eating today. Like
we got guys making millions of dollars in high school.
30 years ago, I don't recall anybody ever telling me what they had to eat. And now you got to see it.
Yeah.
I never caught up with, hey, Joe, what'd you have for dinner today? Because you didn't, what'd you have for dinner last week? Because you didn't send me a photo of it in the mail.
Yeah, you got people posting videos of them making every single day.
So what we're seeing with all these kids is just me. There's no us. I know I'm sounding like old man, get off my lawn, but there's a tremendous amount to gain being Bobby Frazier and winning it all as a senior after starting as a freshman and dealing with injuries. There's a lot to say and a lot of value to the life experience that Nate Britt will have winning a title as a senior after starting some and being a backup. Quentin Thomas, I'm talking about backup point guards here. They won their national titles. All three of Roy's national titles, he had senior backup point guards who today would have been gone.
Oh, God, yeah.
Out the door.
It might not have lasted a season, AJ.
Yeah. So there's something to say. Now, maybe they don't have the money or didn't have the money in the bank. It'd probably be gone by now. But money is only so much. I know money's like if someone offered me $1 million to do this job for somebody else, I'd take it in a heartbeat for a lot of reasons. Although I love this job. Maybe I wouldn't because I love doing what I do. I love having guys like you on my staff. There's a lot of, you get older in life, you have a little bit different perspective. When you're young, like, go get that money. Because you see a college basketball team, where they walk in the hallway, they go by the media meals and right by the press room and go to the visitors locker room in the Dean Dome. Watch them walk in sometime, especially if it's a power conference team. I'd love to know what the combined price tag on all the earrings are.
It's crazy.
Especially now. It's like $500,000.
Yeah, it's just different, man. And again, I
don't have a problem. I don't personally have a problem with that. I'm just making a point.
No, it just illustrates how different it is. And
we're putting so much value on actual stuff like that. And the experience has a tremendous amount of value too. But with respect to Drake Powell, he did have a good experience for 1 year. He stayed and played at the hometown school. He has a great opportunity. The thing that gives me confidence that Drake will make it is because he's a smart guy. He's a really smart guy. I think he's got pretty good perspective. Even now, it's not up to us to say he's got wrong perspective because maybe he's 1,000% right. Maybe he's in the league for 15 years. Yeah, we don't know. And I think that he's got a work ethic because remember, he went up the recruiting boards for the last couple of years before he got to Carolina. He wasn't as highly rated when he committed to Carolina as he was when he got to Carolina. And it wasn't because people said, well, he's going to North Carolina, we got to bump him up. Well, he got better and better and better and better and better, like Derek Dixon has been doing. Mm-hmm. So Drake's going to get better. Wherever he goes, they say, okay, you need to work on these three things, dude. He's going to work on those three things. Mm-hmm. So, and my stuff about before, people probably fixate on that, but it's talked about behind the scenes, the value of the experience. And that message got through 3 years ago when NIL started. It's not getting through now. It's not the same.
Yeah, it's kind of, I told you this off camera, but it's not rocket science, but it really just feels like every decision that's ever made in the transfer portal, this is kind of separate from Drake's decision here, but it's just centered around money in some way, shape, or form. And again, I don't blame kids like you're saying. I don't blame anybody for doing that because you never know. And that's a lot of money to be making as a 19, 20, 20-year-old kid, especially
at any age.
It's an age, especially when a lot of these guys, most people in college basketball are not going to play in the NBA. They might go overseas and have a good career, but they're not going to make a ton of money.
Very few of them do that.
So it's like, I get why you want to get the bag now. But again, just like anything, AJ, there's nuances to both. And you can look at each side and kind of say, yeah, I get that. But you can also make an argument that the experience is a lot too. And sometimes sticking it out somewhere benefits you more in the long run than going getting paid an extra $100,000.
That's why Drake's decision is basketball, because he could have stayed in North Carolina and made more money.
Yes. And you got to give him credit for taking a risk not taking a risk, but taking
a lot of prongs to it, but it's a basketball decision.
Yeah. And taking that leap and having the confidence in yourself and your abilities to say, you know what, I think I'm actually ready to go do this thing.
And Carolina is looking for his replacement as you and I speak.
Yes, they are. It'll be very intriguing to see how quickly they end up getting that replacement, because like anything, you want to get him as soon as you can. So yeah, man, we'll see. I'm sure we'll be doing a podcast at some point over the next X amount of days where we'll be coming on here and talking about who Carolina's signed as Drake Powell's replacement. I guess that's the beauty of the portal, AJ. When you lose a guy like this, it's never two panic stations, because you just say, well, I've got this big pool of X amount of players I can go kind of pick and choose and see who I can get out of.
That pool is not as deep as it was.
No,
so you got to get cracking on it.
Yeah, I guess
this is why the basketball portal being open, it's open too long. It shouldn't open until after the national championship game. It should be open for 10 days because everyone should know.
Agreed.
Open it 2 days after the national game. Keep it open 10 days, and that's it. Everyone should know. Mm-hmm. You should have been taking the time to get that information ready to rock, because there's too much reactionary portal now. That's kind of what happened here with Lubin getting the portal because they brought this guy in. He's making that much. And it's just birds flying to different nests all over the place.
Yeah, so much of it is reactionary. You're absolutely right, man. And we'll continue to kind of talk about this portal and other stuff that, podcasts and things that we do. So this won't be the last time we kind of have similar conversations to this. But yeah, Drake Powell going to the NBA draft. Wish him best of luck. Like I said, covering from a year, a really enjoyable guy to cover, really nice kid, and a lot of talent in there. And I'm intrigued and hoping he, goes to the next level and does well, and be interested to see what he can do. So, yeah, man, I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones, another edition of the THI podcast. I appreciate you guys watching, as you always do. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell too, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.